I sat at that table the whole night on Christmas, and not one of them came. Not a call, not a knock, nothing but 4 cold plates staring back at me until the candles burned all the way down. The next morning I found out exactly why, scrolling through Facebook with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Let me back up and tell it properly. I'm Henry Boyd, 71 years old, and I spent 35 years running a machine shop on Main Street in Larkspur, Indiana. Boyd Tool and Die. I built it out of one used lathe in a rented garage into a building I owned outright, plus 2 storefronts next door that I rented out cheap to family. Guys still stop me at the hardware store to ask about a part I machined for their granddad's tractor 20 years back. That's the kind of town Larkspur is. My wife Louise kept the books until cancer took her 3 years ago. After that, Christmas was about the only day I still had a real reason to cook. I raised 4 kids in that town. Mark, my oldest, runs a real estate office out of one of my storefronts. Danny, the second, opened a brewery in the unit right next to his. Rachel works downtown at the insurance company. Jenny, the youngest, teaches 3rd grade 2 towns over. I charged Mark and Danny half of what anyone else would have paid in rent, because that's what a father does. I never once brought it up at dinner. I didn't want it to feel like a loan they owed me. I remember Christmases when the kids were small enough to think a wrapped shop apron was treasure. Mark built me a birdhouse out of scrap wood before he could measure a straight line. Danny used to fall asleep under the tree waiting for morning. Back then the phone never needed to ring because everybody was already standing in the kitchen underfoot. I couldn't tell you exactly when the underfoot turned into a phone call and the phone call turned into nothing at all. It happens slow enough that you keep making excuses for it until one day there's nothing left to excuse. This year I cooked like always. Ham, green beans, Louise's roll recipe written in her own handwriting, taped inside the cabinet door so I wouldn't miss a step. I set 4 plates around the table and one for myself at the head, same as every year. Then I waited. 6 o'clock came and went. 7, then 8. I called Mark first, straight to voicemail, then Danny, then Rachel. Nothing. Jenny finally picked up, sounding strange, distracted like she was somewhere loud. Dad, I'm so sorry, I meant to call, I got tied up. And then the call dropped. By 10, the candles had burned low, and the ham had gone hard at the edges. I told myself there had to be a reason. Car trouble, maybe, or bad signal wherever Mark's cabin sits. I've made every excuse in the book for my own children, and that night I made every last one of them twice. Around midnight I finally cleared the plates, blew out what was left of the candles, and went to bed without a single answer. I woke up the next morning still turning it over in my head, and I did something I almost never do. I opened Rachel's Facebook page with my coffee still steaming beside me. Right at the top of her page was a photo posted the afternoon before, time-stamped 2 full hours before I'd even sat down to eat. All 4 of my kids in ski jackets, arms around each other, grinning in front of a lodge in Colorado. Not one of them off alone with some excuse I could almost forgive. All 4 together, somewhere they'd clearly planned for weeks. On the one day they knew exactly where I'd be. I didn't cry. I just sat there with the coffee going cold in my hand, and something in me went quiet and still, the way a shop floor goes quiet right after you shut off the last machine of the night. I called my lawyer that same morning, a man named Russ I'd trusted for 20 years. I need to talk about the buildings, I said, and I need to talk about the discount. Here's the part people don't understand about family rates. Mark had been paying me $600 a month for a storefront worth $2,000. Danny paid even less, since the brewery was still finding its feet. I'd never once asked either of them for a thank you. I never needed one, until the morning I sat there with cold coffee and a phone full of proof that I'd been quietly propping up 2 businesses run by people who couldn't be bothered to call their own father back. Russ drew up proper 90-day notices, the kind the law requires, nothing sneaky, nothing petty. Rent on both units would rise to fair market value starting in March. I also moved the buildings into a trust in Louise's name, so that if anything ever happened to me, nobody could simply carve up the property and sell Danny's or Mark's spot out from under him for a quick profit. The trust came with one instruction: fund a scholarship for young people learning a trade, the way nobody ever funded me. Mark called it robbery the day the notice arrived. He phoned that same afternoon, voice tight and fast. Dad, you can't do this. I've got a lease, I've got employees, I've got a mortgage on top of it. You're going to bankrupt me over hurt feelings? 90 days is fair notice, Mark, same as I'd give anybody else. We're not anybody else. No, I said, you're not. Anybody else would have called me back on Christmas. He hung up before I finished the sentence. Danny drove over that same week and stood in my driveway shouting that I was destroying his business out of spite. I'm not destroying anything, I told him. I'm just done paying for a seat nobody sits in. So this is about the rent? You do this to your own family over rent? No, I said. It was never about the rent. The rent's just the part you can see. Rachel didn't call, not that week and not the next. Jenny did, right away, crying, saying she hadn't known about the ski trip until the others had already booked it, that she couldn't afford to fly home once she'd found out. I believed her. She was the only one who'd ever called me on an ordinary Tuesday just to talk, long before any of this happened. By spring, Danny's brewery was struggling to cover the new rent, and he picked up a second job bartending 2 nights a week. Mark tried to fight the trust in court and lost, since Russ had built it clean the first time around. Russ told me later that half of Larkspur called what I did karma, and the other half called me cold. I didn't feel like either one. I just felt like a man who'd finally stopped paying for an empty chair. Rachel finally called in June, almost 6 months later, and asked if we could get lunch. She didn't apologize outright, not really, but she asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. It was a start. I've learned not to expect more than a start from anybody, myself included. I sold the house last fall. Too many rooms for one man and a coffee pot. I bought a smaller place near the river and put up the scholarship fund's first plaque at the community college that spring. 5 kids getting their tuition covered to learn machining, welding, whatever trade they wanted to learn. One of the 5 was a 19-year-old girl who reminded me of nobody in particular, just somebody who showed up early and asked good questions, the kind of thing that used to matter more than blood. Jenny helped me pick every one of them. She comes for dinner most Sundays now, just the 2 of us, and we don't set 4 plates anymore. We set 2, and both of them get used. Louise used to say a full table means nothing if the people in the chairs don't want to be there. I always figured she was just being hard on the kids. Turns out she was further down that road than I ever was. I don't know if Mark or Danny will ever knock on my door and mean it. Maybe one day. I'm not waiting up for it the way I used to wait up for headlights on Christmas Eve. I learned that lesson the hard way, staring at 4 cold plates and a phone full of proof, and I made sure I'd never have to learn it twice.